In a country where there is a lot of poverty and unemployment, there are also crimes and fights. A country with no schools for education, no hospitals for treatment, people addicted to drugs everywhere on the streets, where murder is a common thing. You can imagine how bad the condition of such a country will be, but you don't have to go too far for it. Because this was a reality in Singapore in the year 1965. How Singapore has become a highly developed country in just 20 years. Today, it is included in the top 5 richest countries in the world and is the cleanest country in the world. Let's know who made Singapore in this video, and how Singapore did all this in just 20 years. Singapore is a small country that can be extremely challenging to find on the map. If you look at the map of Southeast Asia, Indonesia, the Philippines and Vietnam can be seen easily, and Malaysia can be spotted easily. But if you zoom in a little bit, you can see Singapore as an island below Malaysia. A small area of the Strait of Johor works as a border between Singapore and Malaysia. Singapore's name comes from Sanskrit. Sing means lion and pur means city, and it becomes Lion City. Singapore is counted among the 4 Asian tigers, which is a significantly developed country in Asia, including South Korea, Singapore, Hong Kong, and Taiwan. If we talk about the population of Singapore, it is very much diversified. People of different religions live together in Singapore, which has 5 major religions, including Buddhists, Christians, Muslims, Hindus, and Taoists. But the second biggest group here is atheists, who do not believe in any religion. Similarly, if we talk about the ethnic group in Singapore, then 75% of Chinese people, 13.5% of Malays, and 9% are Indians live in Singapore. If we talk about the early history of Singapore, Singapore was used as just a refilling port station from the very beginning. Arab, Japanese, Malay, Thai, Chinese, and Indian traders used this route. There has always been control of different nations and races on it. First of all, it was under the Indonesian king. Then the Portuguese came and the Dutch East India Company came. In 1819, a British Indian military officer bought Singapore from the Sultan of Johor, and then he made it a free port, and because of this, more ships began to come towards Singapore. On 15th February 1942, Japanese forces occupied Singapore and ruled over Singapore for 3.5 years. Japanese rule destroyed Singapore's people and economy. After World War II ended in 1945, the British military administration again took control. In 1959, elections were held for the first time, and a very young and energetic leader, Lee Kuan Yew, won the election. He was the first Prime Minister of Singapore. Lee Kuan Yew thought that Singapore should merge into the Malaysian Federation, because Singapore will not be able to handle itself because it is very small. And he does that, but only after 2 years, Malaysia takes Singapore out of the Federation, and this is how the Republic of Singapore comes into existence. At this point, Singapore had no natural resources and neither was there any skilled force that could improve the country. Then how does Singapore become such a country that is the 5th richest country today? This is where Lee Kuan Yew's hard work and such policies begin, which has changed Singapore in just 20 years. First of all, he made peace with the neighboring countries in his region. After that, the first thing he focused on was education. Lee Kuan Yew made a lot of heavy investments in education, built a lot of schools, and hired capable teachers. Today, the literacy rate in Singapore is very high, and the quality of public education is very good, which is almost free. Primary education is compulsory, and the infrastructure of the colleges is excellent. The education network in the whole country is very high. After this, the work that Lee does is to launch the Keep Singapore Clean campaign. He thought that if he wanted to call people from outside to his country, then Singapore would have to keep clean, and blue recycle bins be installed in every building. Lee said that no compromise on clean Singapore, and that is why Singapore is the cleanest country in the world today. Another work that is done is the end of corruption. Corruption is a very big hurdle for any country and its progress. That is why government officers' salaries are increased and politicians' salaries are also increased to equal the salaries of private companies. A fine of $100,000 and jailed for 5 years if you are still caught doing corruption. That is why Singapore is the 4th least corrupt country today and is number 2 in the ease of doing business. To establish peace and stability in its region, Lee Kuan Yew established an organization association of Southeast Asian nations in 1967, in which 5 foreign ministers of the countries included Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, the Philippines, and Thailand. These countries deal with each other in peace and cooperation so that there can be peace and economic development in their region. If the system of transport in the country is not effective, then how will the country progress? But the problem with Singapore is that its size is very small, and if roads are made everywhere, then a lot of space will go on it, and the cars running on them will create a lot of pollution and parking problems. So it was very important for him to discourage cars and to build public transport for every person. That is why today in Singapore, you have to pay a lot of heavy tax to buy a car, and Singapore is the most expensive country if you want to keep a personal car. At one time, only a limited number of cars could travel on the road, and if we talk about public transport, then it is one of the least expensive, extremely safe, and cleanest in the whole world. In the system of 200 km, nearly 3 million people travel daily. More than 140 stations of 6 MRT lines have spread throughout Singapore.